some parts of the blockchain project inherently may solve the problems of regulation, then you don't need to have regulation. The mechanism in my paper makes regulation at a substantive level of protecting small investors, for example.
There is a massive problem now in public markets because liquidity is drying off. Public markets, in the UK, but I think everywhere, they are suffering a lot. Financial Fox is proud to partner with HIVE Digital Technologies, a public listed company focusing on building the green energy infrastructure for the AI revolution. HIVE was the first crypto miner to go public in Canada in 2017. They are also listed on Nasdaq and the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. They hodl and they are a leader in efficient Bitcoin mining with the best hash rate realization in the industry. Their operation powered by green energy, hydropower in Sweden and Canada, and geothermal in Ireland. HIVE was also the first crypto miner to buy GPUs, chips, and have an AI strategy. And that's very exciting considering the AI data center are such a high profitable business. Finally, and most importantly, HIVE care about shareholders. That's why their strategy is low dilution, low G&A, and focus on cash flow. If you don't know HIVE, check them out at hivedigitaltechnology.com and follow them on social media. Remember, AI is the future and Bitcoin is rising as a new asset class. Some analysts have a target price above $100,000 for 2024, but let's see. For now, we hodl and don't forget to check out HIVE. More information in the description. The whole crypto and Web3 space has a big problem that has not been fixed yet, and that's governance. Think, for example, so many DAOs failure and, so many complication and also investor token holder that become victim of failure in actually our governance infrastructure. Well, we have got governance framework in the real world. We need a proper governance framework also in Web3 and crypto. Joining me today, I have a professor from Stanford University, Jeff Strnad, that is going to share the work that he has been doing on governance and the recent paper that he has published about contestable DAOs. This is definitely an episode that you don't want to miss. We have the full recording that was live on LinkedIn and Twitter. I've got all the links in the description below, including the link to Jeff's paper. Now, before we get into the interview, two things. One, remember that all the content on the channel is for informational purposes only, and we don't offer any financial advice. You always need to do your own research. Super important. Second, I know that many of you are watching the interviews that we do, the content that we share, but you are not yet part of the community. Today, I'm going to ask you a favor. Could you please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media? We need our community to grow. We need the support that you can provide, sharing feedback and also comments. Anything that, can help the channel to grow is always welcome, and that way we can keep bringing amazing guests on the show and discuss a topic that are actually very valuable to everyone in order to understand better the industry, the technology, and always educate, which is our main focus. So please do that, and I will be really grateful. If you have got any question, or you can always reach out to me on my Twitter accounts, the Fixie, send me a DM, or via email at steffi@financialfox.news. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, well, it's exciting to be here.
So perhaps it would be good to kind of start with just an introduction of yourself, what you do.
Okay, well, so I'm a professor at Stanford, and I've worked on some blockchain projects in addition. And I have a diverse background. I was a physics major in undergraduate, then I did economics with an emphasis on mathematical economics. I also did law school.
Okay, so let's maybe go straight to, the key problems of DAOs. And it will be great if you can kind of like outline them.
Okay, well, any consideration of problems has to start with what are our ideals? Like, what are we trying to do? And as you know, the DAO space, a lot of it was born out of idealism, kind of Web3 kind of idealism. We're going to create these decentralized entities that aren't going to have the problems of, Facebook and et cetera, where it's you have this kind of centralization. That's why the decentralization part is so fundamental. And it's the first word in the DAO is decentralized, right? Clearly, a lot of DAOs are functioning quite well as far as doing the operational things they're supposed to do, like Uniswap, for example. And one of the big problems, as you know, is I would call it entrenchment. There's different words for it, and there's two types of entrenchment. One is what I call, in my paper, I call it explicit control. And that's where you have structurally somebody has a majority of the tokens, or somebody could have a majority of the tokens. To a second kind of control I call implicit control, and this is a well-known phenomenon, is you have a lot of passive token holders, and for that matter, passive delegates. And it turns out that people that study this, there's this one paper that studies 50 DAOs, almost all of them are dominated by a small set of activists. The percentage of people that vote is very low. Okay, so this looks like a blatant contradiction of the ideals of DAOs, because this is exactly what we didn't think we wanted to have as an ideal. And we have really exciting experiments like Optimism, for example, with its retro public goods funding. It's doing all these experiments. Every single round, they're trying a different thing. And some of them have severe problems that you couldn't anticipate before, but we're learning a lot. And so that's what makes this field exciting. That's not a problem when a bunch of things fail. The Constitution DAO, was that a failure? They didn't buy the Constitution. No. It was a really interesting project that changed a lot of people's thinking about how you could set up DAOs that bought. It was a really exciting new idea.
If something goes wrong because there are those points of failure, also concentration of power, not enough activity of the token holders. I mean, it's very similar to kind of what's happened with AGM, with public listed company. You've got loads of investors, but then, they don't vote, right? And so the one they actually have got an active, they are activists. They are the one that can put towards changes. They can push changes to the current board and maybe, even take over a company.
And, that point right there raises another super important point.
Okay.
We have things like participation. Well, why? Why is participation that important? So if you think about token holders, we have all these classic ideas about why people don't vote. And especially in kind of a corporate context, which is kind of an analogy. So what are they? Well, for one thing, there's the paradox of voting. If I have only a small stake, the chance I'll be decisive is really small, and it's costly to vote. And so I'm not going to vote. And then the other thing we have all kinds of other things. Another thing we would call this in corporate area, this it's an important idea in my paper, is we have so-called Jensen-Meckling free riders. So what is that? So that's where I own something. I own a stock, I own an index fund, I own a token, but I don't really participate in governance. I'm not really making any efforts to make it better. I'm free riding on the other people who are, okay? And so I give my talk, and a lot of times I ask people in the audience, well, how many people are Jensen-Meckling free riders? So this is a general problem. The Jensen-Meckling problem is that if I don't own 100% of something, I have suboptimal incentives to make an effort. Even if I own 20%, I'm only going to get 20% of the reward. So this is a general problem. It's a problem that the mechanism that I invented solves, okay? And it solves it in a way that it could solve it in the same way in the corporate context. It would potentially revolutionize corporate governance.
So interesting, Jeff, because you just brought up a very interesting problem that exists in governance everywhere, like, forever has existed, and we never kind of find a solution to change it and to activate this community of token holder, to wherever small you are, for a certain aspect in a certain time of the life cycle of their project, for you to have the opportunity and be empowered to make a change. And it looks like actually blockchain or crypto could help that.
Right. And so we have an experimental field here where we can try new ideas. That's one reason I'm so excited to work in this field. Even if DAOs never themselves develop into a gigantic part of the economy. And I think there's a chance they will, okay? Even if they don't, we're going to do all these experiments, and I think we're going to advance the concept of governance across the entire world for the entire future in a very powerful way. And that's something that's just unbelievably honored and humbled to be part of that.
And I also think, if we kind of look at the stage of the overall crypto industry, where now regulation, is kind of like trying to understand crypto and to not help crypto to go mainstream, but they are actually playing an important role right now. And that's where, governance become important, because if you have governance, you have got some level of kind of like security, enforcement, organization, and that's where regulation can have a say, and regulators can maybe feel more confident they are actually signing off, or they are embracing, this decentralized movement, really.
Right. Well, there's another part of this too. So that's absolutely true and absolutely important. And regulators often are going to look for the people that are running things and hold them responsible. But there's another side to it too, which my paper also the mechanism also addresses, that some parts of the blockchain project inherently may solve the problems of regulation, then you don't need to have regulation. And my paper, I think, considerably adds to that. It creates the mechanism in my paper makes regulation at a substantive level of protecting small investors, for example, much less necessary. That's a claim. That's a claim, by the way. That's a strong claim.
If something goes wrong with a DAO, what can happen? What has happened as well? Maybe you can bring some example from the past where there was a DAO failure and, that we had some really bad outcomes.
Well, I mean, there's lots of examples. I mean, the very first DAO, the DAO in 2016 is one of the most famous examples, right? So they have a hack. To fix the hack, they fork the entire Ethereum chain, which also conflicts with, the code is law kind of ideals. They forked the whole thing. They forked this huge layer one chain to block this hack of the DAO. And then the DAO also got the SEC made it into their regulatory example of something that was a security and didn't register. Okay, so that's an example. Now, is that a failure? It's the same thing. On the face of it, the DAO failed. They refunded all the money, fortunately, because they're Ethereum forked so they could give back the ETH, right? Well, it looks like a massive failure. But what did we learn from it? Well, we learned that, you got to pay attention to regulation.
So let's talk about your paper. I would like also to understand what are some of the interesting projects that you think are doing something that could be useful, or like an innovative approach to kind of like governance.
So one problem we're trying to solve is entrenchment. So the paper creates an auction mechanism in which any party can initiate an auction and if they win the auction, they get temporary control of the DAO. Okay, they have actual control of the DAO temporarily. Okay, and it's also contestable control. Anybody else can have a later auction, number one. And number two, we're going to limit the time period that control can run. Okay, and so why? Now this sounds awful. This sounds like this is like we're in a war, right? But here, what are we doing? Well, entrenchment is over. Like the fact that somebody has a lot of tokens, it doesn't matter. They have to win the auction. Okay. And also we have the problem of empty voting, where people, this actually happens in crypto. It happens in the corporate world. People have votes for stock, but they don't actually have the underlying economic interest. In the classic way we do that in the real world is you borrow the stock. Like around votes in the United States, all of a sudden there's massive borrowing of the stock. Why? Because the borrower can vote, but the lender, all the economic interest is for the lender. And this is it's a very tricky area, because malicious actors can get empty votes and then take a short position and then tank the DAO or tank the corporation. And so, but empty voting under this mechanism doesn't matter. You have to win the auction. It doesn't matter what votes you have. Okay. So why are we doing this? Okay. Well, we can also add on all of these additional parts. What kind of auction are we going to have? Well, the auction is designed, we have two goals. One, we want to pick the best future for the DAO, okay, the best possible project. And second, and this is very important, we want to allocate the surplus, the gain from improving the DAO to the existing token holders, not to the person that is the innovator. Okay. And who are the existing tokens? Now, one thing that's really important to mention is this sounds like, oh, these are just economic DAOs. These are just things that are like businesses. Well, that's not really true. There's a broader category, which I call economic DAOs. So if we have a DAO that it's like a social it's like nouns, it's like a social project, okay? The value of the token, as long as the value of the token reflects the value of the project, this mechanism is applicable. And here's something really important. Let's suppose that the project is valuable because people have community values. They want to have, for example, a social media application where it's run by the participants and not by, that's a Web3 ideal. Well, guess what? If people really want that, that's going to have a really high token value. We know there's all kinds of problems with voting, theoretical problems, serious ones. If, there's all these impossibility theorems. Guess what? Those apply to DAO. They massively apply to DAOs because a lot of the things that mitigate them in the real world are absent. If if you just have a series of votes, of up and down votes, and that's all you have, and you don't have ability, people can't bribe each other, they can't then they have the McKelvey-Schofield chaos theorem, which says that if you have more than one dimension of issues, anything you pick is dominated by something else. So you have instability. And not only that, you can end up anywhere in the policy space after a series of votes. This is a terrifying theorem. I think for me, is a major priority is it's really important for people to understand the things that we already know about voting. We already know a lot of things about corporate governance because the same things that are going to arise. In fact, they're going to rise at warp speed. Why? Because we're producing all these new governance things. And boom, 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 some of them are going to blow up because of these problems, right?
There is a massive problem now in public markets because the liquidity is drying off and all the, investors, they want to really speculate, they go to crypto, right? So the public markets, in the UK, but I think everywhere, they are suffering a lot. And at the same time, you see all these like tokenization of stocks and everything is going in that direction. So I think there's going to be a really big overall change in public markets, maybe tending more towards token.
You're probably not the smallest investor, but suppose you were. But we go back to Stefania at 19 years old, okay? We put her in the environment today. She has a brilliant idea about a particular DAO, okay? Guess what? We can, because we have the control mechanism, we can get some funding and we can say, okay, hello, we're initiating an auction. And it's a Stefania idea. And then you can end up with control of the DAO temporarily. Now somebody has to make these big deposits, etc. Okay. So now we've opened up the field of people that can potentially be leaders. And how are we going? The auction mechanism it selects the best one, the one's going to create the most value and is going to deliver the most value to their token holders. We've opened it up now. And, if we implemented this in the regular corporate world, this changes everything. Right now, like, for example, if you want to take over Meta, guess what? Mark Zuckerberg has control of Meta. If the mechanism is there, that's over. And basically, the ability to treat, in some sense, the ability to have permanent control is over. And this is intellectually a very idea with very deep roots that go back way into the 19th century of, Henry George and William Vickery. A lot of us was with respect to public things, but William Vickery in particular envisioned continuous auctions, that instead of people owning things, we would have an auction to find the person that values it the most, and they would basically rent it. And in some sense, this idea creates that. If you can get control, but what are you doing? Well, you're renting it because you're making this commitment to increase the value and you're putting the money down, right? You're basically renting it for a while, but nobody can ever own it forever, okay? And so that's a radically different approach. And, people have noted this. So this is not like, this is something that goes way back intellectually. The people that invented quadratic voting, at the end of their paper in the American Economic Review, they say there's also these other private things like William Vickery continuous auctions. That's an analogous idea that exists in the private market. Well, guess what? My idea is a strong example of that.